morning, guys. We were 12 degrees Fahrenheit last night, and it was about 14 degrees Fahrenheit this morning when I got up and started to do chores. One of the reasons I don't get a whole lot of B-roll in the winter is because it's cold enough out here to freeze my camera. But I wanted to show you my TUFF greenhouse. This is a commercial greenhouse that we bought in 2015 using a Kickstarter. And it's a great greenhouse. It's a conventional greenhouse, and that means that it has some high maintenance issues for me in the winter. Because it has ribs that are spaced about 5 feet apart, when I have a heavy snow, I have to come out and tap the top of the greenhouse in order to get the snow to slide down off the greenhouse. And then if I'm not out here soon enough in the morning to shovel what falls off the sides away, it can put strain on the plastic at the bottom of the greenhouse. Alright, this is the side of the greenhouse, and I've already shoveled most of it away this morning. I have to be really careful because if the snow isn't soft, it's icy. And if you get too much weight on that snowbank, it'll actually poke into your greenhouse plastic and cut it. It's very, very sharp. So you can see the space right there. That's where the snow started to melt from the heat inside the greenhouse. This part right here, you can see that it's kind of pushing in on the plastic. It's putting pressure on that plastic and stretching the plastic. Okay, before I go around and show you digging out the other side of my conventional greenhouse, I wanted to show you how the hotbed greenhouse combats the ice and the snow. So this is the bigger new hotbed greenhouse I'm building. The only difference between this and the small one in the backyard that you guys have already seen is that I widened the paths so that now you can get a wheelbarrow down the middle. The nice thing about the hotbed greenhouses is that if we have a heavy snow, all I have to do is come out and tap the cow panel and everything just slides off. But if I don't come out and tap the greenhouse, unless we've got, you know, a foot of snow on top of the greenhouse, there's no problem. If my conventional TUFF greenhouse had a foot of snow on top of it, the plastic would already be destroyed. For scale, that's a table, a full-size dinner table. So once I have all this popped down, I need to reshovel. I do find that it's easier to get this from the inside. The first thing I do is start away from the greenhouse and I move towards the greenhouse. That takes the weight of the snow off before I start to mess with any of that sharp ice next to the greenhouse plastic. The nice thing about the hotbed greenhouse is that if you get big banks of snow piled up on the sides of your hotbeds, it actually acts as an insulator. The snow in no way can put pressure on the hotbed that would break it because it will have so much wood mulch and animal manure and everything on the inside pushing back and settling. Plus the way that I reinforce it, any snow that builds up along the hotbed greenhouse just makes it work better in the winter because snow is an amazing insulator. It does a great job as insulation. On a straight plastic greenhouse, not so much. Too much weight, too much pressure. Alright, so one question people ask me is, why am I not just recharging the beds that I've already built? And the answer to that is, I do, but if you want a hotbed that can compete with negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit, it needs to be a new bed for that winter season. The bacteria eating and living happily in a compost pile is what creates your heat. And it's also what makes the hotbed sink over time, is that as that carbon, which for me is wood chips, gets broken down and turns into compost, it sinks. So the heat from a really good hotbed will last me until the end of the growing season in 2023. The last time I built a brand new hotbed, it lasted me from January until the end of November, and it would have gone longer than that, but I decided I didn't want to plant anymore for that year. I wanted to take a few weeks of break. So I had like 346 days of growing season. I grew figs and sweet potatoes in this greenhouse in the new hotbed. Potatoes, what else? I planted ginger in it too. So when you are planting in January, you want to plant things that are cut and come again, things that are going to feed you very quickly. I like to plant Swiss chard and collard greens and kale and that kind of thing in my first hotbed. Then I cut it and it grows again, and I cut it and it grows again. And then as I feel like it, I start to make bigger spaces in the hotbed and plant in my transplants. But I like to start really early with broadcast seeding of greens. For any of you who like my projects, I had a reminder from one of my Patreons that I need to talk about my Patreon page more. I have my hotbed greenhouse plans on my Etsy store, but they're only $7. And I try to make it not only affordable, but also reflective of the fact that I haven't really finished working on these. They have a long way to go to make them perfect, but I like to share the plans so that if you want just kind of a general idea of how to build the hotbeds, you can. That being said, if you're willing to support me on Patreon, it allows me to have the funding I need to continue to make these experiments. My dad was the one that paid for the pallets for this hotbed, and I really appreciated his support. Currently, I make $100 a month on my Patreon account, and it would be lovely to have a little bit more autonomy and flexibility in the videos that I like to make, by knowing that I have some independent funding that isn't dependent on YouTube or my $7 Etsy store plans. So super appreciate you guys. For all of you who are my patrons, you make a huge difference in my morale on the 5th of the month when I get that $100 check that allows me to go buy some more screws. Sweet potato vines are edible, very edible. Pepper plants, tomato plants, potato plants are not edible. Don't feed them to your animals. But sweet potatoes are not a nightshade. They're a completely different type of plant from a very different family than your tomatoes and your potatoes. So I'm going to be really careful that I'm not accidentally taking pepper plants, and I'm going to go feed these to the rabbits. They're also edible for people. In Asia, they are a delicacy, and they will eat the vines instead of the potatoes, instead of the tubers. So I'm going to put this in another basket to feed. And these guys are really aggressive. Okay, and here's an interesting thing. I've got one that came out of the hotbed, and it's wilted and frosted. This one was on the side of the hotbed instead of inside the hotbed, where the heat is rising constantly. So that tells me something. That tells me that the hotbed is just working overtime to keep all these plants happy, because the only ones that are freezing that I'm seeing so far are the ones on the side of the bed that are not above the hotbed, because heat rises, it doesn't move out to the side necessarily unless you've got a lot of it. It's above where it's keeping everything warm.